I've already read chapter 1 just out of curiosity, and I had to force myself to put it down. So what happened was this used bookstore near me was going out of business. So here's another book haul. Now, you may be telling yourself, Nicole, I've watched at least enough of your videos to know that you're moving soon, and you're right. However, I have made an agreement with myself is that I can only haul as many books as I unhaul. For right now, I've divided the books into 3 sections. The classics that I bought, which are books that are almost 150 years old, not these books themselves, but just were published over 150 years ago, about some modern classics, which are pretty much anything that was written in the 20th century or later. And then I have my most recently published books, which I would consider like either postmodern or by and large things written since like the 70s, basically. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with 2 of the books that I am just absurdly excited about. So the first one is The Haunted Hotel and Other Stories by Wilkie Collins. So I have been reading a lot of Wilkie Collins this year, and I am just loving him, and I can't stop, won't stop. This book, I do have a bind up of 3 of his short stories, which does include The Haunted Hotel, but this has, I think, 6 other stories in it. And these stories cover things from ghosts to corpses that are moving and family curses. And if you have not read Wilkie Collins, he is just a master at like weird things happening in books and building some good suspense. He is a Victorian novelist and wrote a whole bunch of wonderful long novels, but I am finding that I also enjoy his short stories, so I am really excited about this book. This next book, I didn't even know existed, and that was part of the weird thing about this bookstore that was closing where I got these books from, was they're a used bookstore, but I think they got books in from one of their other locations because they had books that I've never seen there before, and the shelves, of course, were like a mix of everything, but they also had versions of books that I had never seen before. So while I was looking for mainly classics, I couldn't just look for like Oxford World Classic spines or Penguin Classic spines, because then I'd potentially miss some. So I actually had to look at the title of each book, and I'm glad I took the time to do that, because I also found A Long Fatal Love Chase by, yes, do you see that? Louisa May Alcott. How did I not know about this book? Let me share with you some of the fabulous marketing on this book, such as the little sub description here. He stalked her every step, for she had become his obsession. What? Yeah, so in case like me, you had no idea, apparently Louisa May Alcott sort of went into the gothic slash sensation novel writing. This was for a long time one of her unpublished works because they did not think it was publishable, because they felt that it was too sensational to be published. And it tells a dark love story. So apparently Louisa May Alcott, 2 years before she wrote Little Women, wrote a dark romance. I'm very interested in reading this book. The next 2 books I have are by 2 authors whose works I just want to read more of. And the first one is Mary Shelley, and this is The Last Man. This was also kind of like the Louisa May Alcott, like, why don't we hear more about these authors' other works? So Mary Shelley obviously is pretty well known. I feel like that's an understatement, for Frankenstein, which is generally considered like one of the first sci-fi that has existed. But honestly, it's a gothic novel, so this, I would say, is probably more sci-fi. So this is considered a sci-fi dystopian or an apocalyptic fantasy novel written by Mary Shelley in the 18th century. And it's set in the late 21st century and follows basically the world as it comes to its end. Yeah, so if you'd like to read some apocalyptic fantasy by Mary Shelley, here's your pick. I also picked up the selected poems of William Blake. I majored in 18th century British Lit in college and read a lot of 18th century poetry, and William Blake was one of the few that I actually liked, partially because he didn't feel it was necessary to write a like 30-page poem. Thank you, thank you. Also, he combined a lot of his poetry with beautiful artwork that he did himself. I don't think this is one of them. I have 2 authors that are new to me, but whose works I wanted to try thanks to looking at the 1899 best books ever list, or whatever it was called. I'll link it so that you can find that video if you want. But the first one is Midshipmen Easy by Frederick Marryat. So he was a 19th century author who wrote largely about, seafaring and navy and that kind of thing. This book specifically is about the rise of a midshipman in the Navy and is actually considered Frederick Marryat's best work, which is why I've been wanting to read it. So I found myself very lucky to find a very inexpensive copy of this in the store. I thought it was just something I'd have to read by ebook. I prefer to read physical books, so I was glad to find it. None of my libraries have it except as ebooks, so this was an exciting find for me. I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about seafaring adventures in the Navy, written in the 19th century. But that's partially why he was pretty prolific, but that's why I chose this book, being that it's considered his best. And the next new to me author is Oliver Goldsmith, the Vicar of Wakefield. This is an author that I specifically have been wanting to try. The Vicar of Wakefield really is just about the fall and rise of the Primrose family in 18th century England. This is supposed to be a pretty lighthearted and fun read, so we'll see about that. I then also found a couple of books in series that I've been wanting to try, and the first book is Waverley by Sir Walter Scott. This is set during the Jacobite Rebellion, which happens just after Forever Amber, which is a book I recently read, and is book one in the Waverley novels, which also in that series is included Ivanhoe, which I think is the book that at least more people than not have heard of by Sir Walter Scott. So I do want to give book one a try, though I have heard that Ivanhoe can be read on its own. Continuing with the series, I also picked up The Deerslayer by James Fenimore Cooper. This is the first of the Leatherstocking Tales, though apparently the last book that was written in that series. And this series follows Natty Bumppo's life as he crosses into the American frontier and just all his experiences there. The well-known book, I feel like, in the Leatherstocking series would be The Last of the Mohicans, which is book 5. No, maybe 4, 3? I have no idea. The other book that I also picked up by James Fenimore Cooper was I found a copy of The Prairie, so I snatched that up, and this is book 5 in the Leatherstocking series. So these are not matching, but both of the same series, and that's okay with me, because if I end up loving the series, then I will actually end up getting it in a matching hardback. Okay, so that was the last of my sort of classics. Now I'm moving into the modern classics that I picked up, the first one being The Portable Dorothy Parker. I have been eyeing this book in this edition for probably the last year and change, and so I figured it's never going to get cheaper than this price. This is just a collection of writings by Dorothy Parker, who was an American poet and writer, and she's really well known for her wit and satire in all of her writings, so it includes some short stories by her, poetry, articles, book reviews, criticisms, letters, just a whole gamut of things, and I'm really interested to get into it. I also picked up The Good Soldier by Maddox Ford, and this story is about John Dowell and where he tells the saddest story that is about an affair. So we'll see. I've heard some interesting things about this book that has made me really curious about reading it. Probably a more well-known book that I picked up was Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier. This is an author whose works I want to read most of, if not all of. And this is a Gothic tale that is supposed to be, I'm sure, like Rebecca, but also in the same vein as Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights. From the bit of the description that I read, I think it's probably going to be a bit more like Wuthering Heights in some manners than Jane Eyre. I picked up The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. I had a little bit of a history with Toni Morrison due to a reading in high school, which I won't get into here, but I've decided to try her again after a very long time, and I'm going to start with The Bluest Eye, which I believe is her debut novel. And The Bluest Eye is about a young girl who finds beauty only in having blonde hair and the bluest eye. Yet she is an African American girl, so these are things that she will never obtain. So she struggles with her dream and her idealized version of what beauty is and should look like. This is part of my book haul, but was not from the used book sale. I just actually bought it online. And that is Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. This is the uncensored original edition. So when I found that there was now in print an edition of The Jungle, which was as he intended and wanted to originally publish it versus how it was published, I wanted to get this edition. And the final modern classic I purchased was Lucky Jim by Kingsley Amis. And this follows the story of Jim Dixon, who is a lecturer of medieval history, who attempts to hold down his academic job and win the woman of his dreams. So, given different things going on in my life and academia becoming more a part of it, I thought this would be a very timely read. So I'm looking forward to getting to that. I did get one nonfiction, and that is The Radium Girls by Kate Moore. And as it talks about the dark story of the America's Shining Women. And this covers the history in America of the women who were assigned the job of basically making glow in the dark watches. And the way they did this was painting radioactive material, radium, onto the watch faces. This was sort of new technology or new science at the time using radium, and they initially did not know about the side effects of it in great detail until these girls started falling sick, and then the company that is hiring them tries to cover up the truth of what's going on. So I am really looking forward to reading this book. I have heard very good things about Kate Moore's nonfiction, and this should be probably a hard but informative read. A fun edition that I picked up just because I want to own it is The Princess Bride by William Goldman. I have already read this book, so it'll be a reread for me when I get to it, but per usual, the book is better than the movie. And I think the only thing about this book is the movie is so good, it's hard to imagine that the book is any better, but it is. So I'm really looking forward to rereading this. I think I've read it twice already, so I will definitely enjoy my third read of this book. And if you haven't read it, go pick it up. Earlier this year, I figured out that Geraldine Brooks is not the same as this other author that I don't like, and so I was excited to find some of her books also on sale. So I picked up Year of Wonders, which is a novel about the plague, and I believe it's about a town that is situated in the middle of the plague in 13th century, nope, the 16th century plague outbreak. And oh, so here we go, Forever Amber. And it's about this town that kind of closes off and I believe like contracts the plague and how the people there take care of one another. It's supposed to, even though it's set during the plague, be a pretty heartwarming book. So I'm looking forward to reading about that. Also by Geraldine Brooks, I bought People of the Book. Um, People of the Book is about a young lady who is given the job of restoring and protecting and sort of what would be the word, conserving a rare book found so that it doesn't get destroyed during the Bosnian Wars. So I have not heard a lot of people talk about this book, but I really want to read more of Geraldine Brooks' work. So I am excited to get to this. I'm excited to try out more of Irving Stone's works, and so when I saw that at the bookstore had The Passions of the Mind, I was excited to give it a try. This is supposed to be the biographical, dramatic telling of Sigmund Freud's life. I have already at this point read Lust for Life, which was about Vincent van Gogh. He has biographical stories, I think like 7 of them on different people's lives. There's also one on Michelangelo and I think wives of some of the American presidents. So, but this was probably the other one that really stood out to me that I wanted to try. So I was very happy to get it. An unknown book to me that just sounded really cute and was like, I think like just $1 or $2 was Becoming Jane Eyre by Sheila Kohler. So this is supposed to follow, as far as I know, sort of the imagined story of the Bronte sisters and Charlotte Bronte's experience of writing Jane Eyre. So I haven't heard anybody mention this book, but when I saw it, it's just a cute little book. And it sounded like it would potentially be a good read. So I'm hoping it's as good as I'm thinking it's going to be and that I don't regret my choices. The next book I found I was really excited about because I've been looking for this for a while and can't find it in stores. My library doesn't have it, yada, yada, yada. And that book is Havisham by Ronald Frame. So this book is obviously, if you know, inspired by great Charles Dickens' Great Expectations, and it's supposed to be basically Great Expectations, but from Mrs. Havisham's perspective, or at least it's supposed to be her backstory, I think. Anyway, I heard about this book probably over a year ago, and as soon as I heard about it, I was like, I've got to have this book, but I've had a really hard time finding it. Like, I think I can get it on Amazon or whatever, but I didn't want to do that if I didn't have to. So when I found it I was like, yes, getting this, got it. It's good. At least I hope it's good. I also picked up Heaven's Net is Wide. This is supposed to be a really good story, fantasy story. And I'm a little confused because if I understand, I think this is the prequel, but technically if you do it in reading order, it should be the first book you read. And then I also found the last book in the series. But this book was written last, but I think you're supposed to read it first as a prequel. Like if I look at the side, it says the first tale of the Otari, and this is the last tale. So I'll have to look that up on Storygraph and figure it out. But I have heard about this Tale of Samurais, and I'm looking forward to reading this series in theory, because we all know how I am with series, but we'll see. Since this was a rare opportunity to get both books, I didn't want to pass it up. So I didn't. Speaking about continuing series, it was a good opportunity for me to buy the second book in the Baroque cycle. Have I read the first book in the Baroque cycle? No. Did I get sucked in? Yes, because a lot of the libraries don't have the second book. Why would you have the first book and not the second? I checked. And so I'm banking on liking book one so that I will already have book two. And look at how shiny it is with that gold. Very cool covers for these books. So that's it for today. Let me know if you have read any of these books and which ones I should prioritize. I should mention that any book that I do in a book haul, if people recommend it or suggest it or say they love it, whichever ones get the most recommendations, and usually there's like 3 or 4 that will come up over and over again in comments, I put them in my recommendation bowl right there. So if there's a book you would like me to read, make sure you comment on it and let me know. And who knows, maybe at some point I'll be reading your recommendation. That's it for today. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.